What's up, everybody? It's Peter Tragos, the lawyer you know, and on this channel, we break down the trials and cases you care most about so you can understand how the American civil and criminal justice system works. And we try to make sure you understand what your rights are in every situation, which is why we try to walk you through the entire legal process while also answering your insightful questions along the way. And while it's not legal advice, it's always exciting. So buckle up for another episode of The Lawyer You Know.
Hi, everyone. Pete Sardis for The Lawyer You Know. We're back talking about Elizabeth Holmes. The allegation is that she is attempting to flee justice. I'll talk about the facts of what's going on, and I'll also talk to you about the implications for Elizabeth Holmes. But before we do that, if you enjoy the video, please give me a thumbs up. If you've enjoyed this series, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. And as always, if you have questions and comments for me, leave them down below. All right, let's get into it. The government filed a pleading at the end of last week. The allegations are that Elizabeth Holmes had purchased a one-way ticket to Mexico and did not notify the pretrial services office as she's obligated to do. The innuendo being she intended to flee justice after her conviction. The court is probably going to have a hearing on this, and my gut says that the prosecution is going to ask the judge to take Elizabeth Holmes into custody immediately because now she is a flight risk, and to not allow her to self-surrender in April of 2023 as the court's order currently stands. Now, what's the implication to Elizabeth Holmes? Yes, being taken to custody immediately is bad, but she would also lose those points that she gains at the Bureau of Prisons for the court allowing her to self-surrender. And that might mean little differences like housing. It may mean a more restrictive facility. It may mean less phone time. It may mean something that makes her life less comfortable than it would otherwise have been if she were allowed to self-surrender. Now, the defense has not yet filed a response. I'm guessing that the defense position is going to be something like this. Judge, Elizabeth Holmes did not attempt to flee, and I'll tell you why. First of all, she had purchased the tickets to go to a friend's wedding. She bought the ticket at a time when she had not yet started the trial, and she believed that she was going to be acquitted prior to this trip. Therefore, she would not have had to have gotten permission from the court to go on the trip. Second thing, she got a one-way ticket to Mexico. Mexico has an extradition treaty with the United States. They've had it since like 1989. So if in fact she were to go to Mexico, the government, all they'd have to do is contact Mexican authorities, have her found, arrested, and shipped back to the United States. So that's really not the place you go when you want to flee from justice. The third part is this is a commercial flight. A one-way ticket on a commercial flight to Mexico would require a passport because you can't get on the plane without a passport. So where is her passport? Well, it's in the custody of the government because once Elizabeth Holmes was indicted, the government would seize her passport and it would be in the custody of the probation department, pretrial services specifically. So she wouldn't have even been able to get on the plane without that passport. That being said, her intent was that she was going to be acquitted, at which point she was going to go to her friend's wedding in Mexico, and she and Billy Evans would then probably take a vacation since it's been a rough couple of years for Elizabeth Holmes. Understand that this trip, I should say, was supposed to be taken on January 23rd of 2022. So that's last year. This is after Elizabeth Holmes was convicted, but before she was sentenced. So again, another, I guess, defense to this is if you're going to flee, you don't flee, before your sentencing, because if you're going to get a favorable sentence, there's no reason to flee. Now would have been the time for Elizabeth Holmes to abscond if that's what she wanted to do. Let's talk about my personal thoughts. I try to be even on these as much as I can. I want to give you both perspectives, but from my perspective, I really don't think that Judge Davila is going to sanction Elizabeth Holmes. I really do believe that Elizabeth Holmes believed she was going to be acquitted by this jury, at which point she was going to take her husband, Billy Evans, and they were going to go to their friend's wedding, and they were going to have a trip and then come back just like Billy Evans did, because Billy did actually go on this trip. He did leave one-way ticket to Mexico in January of 23rd of 2022, and then he came back in March of 2022 via South Africa. So I'm guessing they actually had a trip beyond just the wedding. If you're going to flee after, well, even before a conviction, you don't go to Mexico. You go to Venezuela, you go to North Korea, you go to a number of places that do not have extradition treaties with the United States. Between you and me, most of the places that you could flee to, that you would not have the risk of being returned to the United States, are probably not places you want to be. There are people that have told me, because I've represented defendants in federal court that have come from all types of places in the world. Some of them have actually told me that the federal prison system in the United States is actually more favorable to day in and day out life in whatever some of those countries are. So, other than your freedom being limited because you can't leave the facility, it's still better than being in some of these places where there is no extradition to the United States. So again, something to think about. Other than that, what do you all think? Do you think Elizabeth Holmes was preparing to abscond, meaning she bought the ticket before her conviction date in anticipation that she would get convicted and then she would just hop on a plane and go to Mexico, never to be seen again? Or do you think this is just too nefarious of a proposal, and the reality is she really just thought she was going to be acquitted and she'd go on this vacation? Tell me your thoughts. Number two, tell me what you think the court is going to do. Presuming the court has a hearing, do you think the court is going to admonish Elizabeth Holmes? Do you think is going to sanction her? What do you think is going to do? Do you think he's going to take her into custody and, is she going to lose her self-surrender status with the Bureau of Prisons? What are your thoughts? Me personally, I don't think most of that's going to happen. I think the judge may have some coarse words with her about her decision-making, but at the end of the day, she has not done anything during the entire time that she's been under supervision by the probation department and pretrial services to lead me to believe this was an attempt to flee the country. Elizabeth Holmes has the ability to do it the right way. She could have gotten a private flight where the names of the passengers are, not listed. She could have had, a number of ways to leave the country without the government knowing about it in time to get to a place where there is no extradition. The reality is flight is difficult for normal people. What I mean by that is if you don't have a family, if you're a career criminal, if you're an international drug lord and you don't really care about the people around you, it's probably easier to flee. But when you have parents and children and a husband and your whole life has been in California, it is very difficult just to pick up your life and go to somewhere that is a place where they're not going to send you back, meaning it's not a vacation spot. It's not the south of France. It's not, Mexico. It's not these types of places. It is places that does not have a good relationship with the United States to the point where they will not extradite prisoners back and forth or criminals back and forth. Now, we're getting a little bit into the weeds on this one, but there are some countries that will not extradite U.S. citizens back to the United States if they're looking at, for example, a death penalty case, or if they're convicted of a crime that does not exist in other countries. For example, if you're convicted of conspiracy, some countries do not consider conspiracy a crime. Just talking about doing something illegal doesn't rise to a level of a crime in their countries, and many times they will not extradite people back for that. But again, these are not countries that you normally would think of when it comes to a place where you'd like to spend the rest of your life. So anyway, you tell me what your thoughts are. At this point, I foresee that the court is most likely going to have a hearing, particularly because of how public this is. I'm guessing there will be some sort of admonishment, but I just don't think the court is going to take Elizabeth Holmes into custody and ruin her self-surrender. I just don't think that that's going to happen, because I don't believe that the judge is going to take the position that Elizabeth Holmes bought this ticket with the intent of fleeing from justice. So you tell me your thoughts, and I will keep you posted as things materialize. Again, thanks for joining me. If you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up. If you've enjoyed this series, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Questions and comments, leave them below. Thanks. Hi, everybody. Pete Sardis for The Lawyer You Know. We are back. Elizabeth Holmes lawyers have punched back to the government about this allegation that Elizabeth Holmes was trying to flee the country. We'll talk about what the response looks like. But before that, if you enjoy the video, give me a thumbs up. If you enjoy this series and haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do so now. And as always, leave me your questions and comments below. All right, what's going on? Last episode, we talked about the fact that the government had made an allegation that Elizabeth Holmes had bought a one-way ticket to Mexico, and their allegation was that her intent was to flee justice, to flee the country in order to not be present for her prison term. The defense has responded, and the response is a slap in the face to the government. The defense's response of pleading is this: these allegations are baseless. Not only are they not based in fact, they're actually flagrant misrepresentations about what had actually occurred back in January of 2022. So let's talk for a second about what the allegations were. The government's perspective was that Elizabeth Holmes bought a one-way ticket during the pendency of her trial. Their position was that it was her intention to leave the country, to flee, so she would not have to serve a prison sentence. The defense's response is, not only is that preposterous, because Elizabeth Holmes' passport had been expired for a number of years, but it is so baseless, in fact, and meritless that the defense has asked that the court strike the pleading from the record. Now, that may not sound like a big deal, but let me tell you, from a perspective of proceedings in federal court, for a court to strike a pleading out of the record so it doesn't even exist there anymore is a big deal. It's tantamount to a sanction, because the only types of pleadings that are stricken from the record are those that are frivolous or those that are meritless and not based in any type of fact. I will tell you, for a court to strike a pleading from a record, I mean, it's got to be a complete train wreck of allegations. Basically, the court has to make a decision that whatever was in that pleading is false, is misleading, is not something that should even be in the record, because it colors the record in a way that is inaccurate, and it's a misrepresentation and a miscarriage of justice. Kind of a big deal. So why is the defense saying that this pleading should be stricken? Apparently, back in January of 2022, so we're talking about a year ago, the prosecutors and the defense had an email exchange about this ticket. And apparently the defense had explained Elizabeth Holmes believes she's going to be acquitted. They have a family friend that's being married in Mexico. They've purchased the tickets in order to go to that wedding, presuming that the verdict comes back not guilty, at which point she'll do the things that she needs to do. She'll get her passport back renewed, and she'll go on her trip. The prosecutors' email response allegedly is that they acknowledge what was going on. They thanked the defense for explaining what was happening, and they were fine with it. So for the government to now come back to the court a year later and make an allegation that Elizabeth Holmes' intent was to flee after having already had a discussion with defense counsel about this ticket a year ago is kind of a little underhanded. Now, what the government was asking was that the court take Elizabeth Holmes into custody, because now they consider her a flight risk. Not only do they want her taken into custody, obviously she would lose her points at the Bureau of Prisons for self-surrender, but they also do not want the court to consider Elizabeth Holmes eligible for something that we call a supersedious bond. And in some of the previous videos we've talked about, the court can leave you out on bond pending the term of your appeal if the court finds that your appellate issues are viable and that there's a good chance that you might be able to win the appeal. So they've asked if that's going to happen. Now, I'm not saying that the court was going to let Elizabeth Holmes out on bond pending the appeal, because at this point, she is scheduled to self-surrender to prison sometime in April of 2023, just a few months from now. But the defense's response is now, not only should none of that happen, but Judge, you should strike this from the pleading, because all of the allegations that the government has put in their motion are baseless. Not only they're baseless, they are a misrepresentation of what had actually happened a year ago. So let me know what your thoughts are. Do you think that the court's going to have a hearing? Do you think that the court is going to admonish the defense? Do you think the court is going to admonish the prosecutors for filing a pleading that apparently is a misrepresentation of the true facts of what had happened in over a year ago. Tell me what your thoughts are. I'll keep you posted as things materialize on this topic. And as always, if you enjoyed the episode, give me a thumbs up. If you've enjoyed this series, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. If you have any questions about the law generally, if there's something we can ever do for you here at the law offices of Tragos, Sardis, and Tragos, which obviously is the host for The Lawyer You Know, let us know. Give us a call and we'll see if we can help you. And if we can't, chances are we can at least give you some guidance so you can find representation elsewhere. But with that, we'll talk to you soon.